Hi, it's John, and I'm happy to be joined today by Jan Christopher Arp. He's the founding managing partner at the Holt FinTech Accelerator, which is quite international but has a strong base in my home country of Canada. So I'm excited to have Jan join. Thank you, Jan, for coming in. How's it going?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much, John, for having me on the show.
I'm glad you brought the Canadian style background as well. It looks fantastic and is making me a little homesick. You have a more European name, but why don't you tell us where you're from and what you're doing in Canada with the Holt FinTech Accelerator?
Yeah, absolutely. So, was a Dutch background, and father immigrated here and got established. And I'm hiding away, quarantining. I think this is as safe as possible up north of Montreal. For it's only an hour north up here at Saint Agathe des Monts. Is my way of protecting myself and others, and it's not too shabby. Kicked off the Holt Accelerator. Very fortunate to be joined by a fifth generation family who was based on the legacy of Sir Herbert Holt, one of the longest serving chairmen of the Royal Bank of Canada. He started other things like became Hydro-Quebec. And so we kicked off with the family. The great-great-grandson and I, Brendan, started this journey. We had another managing partner join us through time, Elizabeth Lett. And so we kicked off this Holt Accelerator, which I'm sure we'll get into. Prior to that, I started a nonprofit called FinTech Cadence, grassroots movement, really about early stage FinTech projects. Probably formed about 100 or so, matching corporates with academia and entrepreneurs to be able to create these projects. Before that, I helped about 12 companies raise about 15 million bucks. So head of finance, really understood the struggles of grinding to get your seed up to Series A rounds completed, and had some companies and great successes and a lot of fun doing that process. And before that, worked in the consulting space. Actually, I was in the space and satellite sector, helping with some big deals and the sort of billion-dollar deals in that infrastructure space. So that's a bit of my background.
Very cool background, Jan, and it sounds like a very interesting family to be working with. So you've got a great collection in the team. What can you tell us about what exactly the Holt FinTech Accelerator is doing right now?
Yeah, so we started this 3 years back with a purpose of helping companies better cross that chasm in the fintech space. And so the family, they've known finance for hundreds of years. Myself, it's all I've known and worked in finance and fintech. We joined forces, and I was already building these, and then bringing the influx of capital, and they made a lot of investments in the space. We kicked off. So we do use a data-driven approach to assess the fintechs, right? So globally, there's probably 10,000 fintechs, everything kind of before Series A. We assess them, we look for those signals, and then we segment, and we look in those areas, and we look at the top 100 or so companies in those segments, and then we kind of target the top ones and actually get them to apply. And as they apply, we put them through this filter of our advisors. So they'll meet up to the best companies, will meet up to 100 of our advisors. So we have 400 advisors. These are financial institutions who could be customers, investors, who can put money in, or are experts from product development to and through that, we will invest in the best companies, helping them to accelerate and reach their next milestone. So an international accelerator, helping them enter into the North American market, generally through the Canadian market as a beachhead market into that ecosystem. And we've seen companies we've invested from Canada, of course, the US, but also across Europe, from the UK to Portugal, Switzerland, Israel to New Zealand and Mexico, Brazil, etc. So international focus and looking just for the best entrepreneurs early stage to get behind.
Sounds like quite a comprehensive differentiator you have there. I know you made a number of points about what makes Holt unique. Can you tell me a little bit about really what are some of the great portfolio companies that have gone through this? Because you mentioned there's a big filter and you're helping at, let's say, a unique stage. What are some companies you can talk about that you've helped succeed?
Yeah, sure. So I give you one example. It's called Owl.co. They were a Canadian-based company, or are a Canadian-based company based out of Vancouver. So we found them out and we said, hey, come on out. We do this selection day, and they meet 100 plus of our advisors. And we saw this great interest. So what they're about is helping the digital identity, but let's call it the KYC space, with their tool. Originally, it was what they thought was a supercharged sales bot, but pivoted through our program. What it does essentially is, let's just take your name or email, we can actually get up to 70 data points on yourself by pulling in a lot of different data sources, which can seem a little bit scary, but when it's used properly, it can do some very important things. For instance, the prevention of fraud. So they've called this, augmented due diligence, and that's been getting huge uptick right now in the insurance sector, especially as given COVID, there's generally a surge in any sort of recessionary activity, specifically related to fraud. So they're a great example of how we found and invested in early stage in a potential company prior to investors. We helped them find their lead investors. We helped them get some early customers, 6-figure deals in this process, and they've gone very, very well. We can't make public any announcements on them, but they're moving quite. They did officially announce a seed. This was 2 years ago, but they're making some great headway. They've actually 4x'd revenues in 6 months during the COVID period. So had 1 million in revenues up to 4 million in revenue. So yes, it is earlier stage companies, but they are growing at a good clip. That's one example of a company.
Really cool example. It sounds like you mentioned data is a big part of what you do. You also use AI in your company website, which we'll leave a link for as well at the end of things. But to what extent does artificial intelligence play a role in your business? And can you share some thoughts on the role it plays in financial services more broadly?
Yeah, for us, it's a pretty important role. So we do a data-driven approach to how we make our assessments, and that starts with 10,000 fintechs that we have globally that are out there. So plugging into different databases, enriching them through our own data sources and the combination thereof, but then trying to identify those signals in our own ranking and filtering mechanism ourselves. Through that process, then also is trying to, so we're looking for not only the best companies, but the best companies that are a fit with our advisor network. So we have 400 advisors, and to do that, you have to better assess, of course, as we mentioned, the portfolio or potential portfolio companies, but also the advisors themselves, and I better understand what they're looking for. And that data actually we learn from, because now the advisors are providing their feedback and grading the best quality fintechs, and each time we're able to learn what they're most interested in. So we're better able to assess what our community is very interested in. So there's definitely a portion of trying to rank it based on this lens we have. We're big on trying to see companies through product, through their financing strategy, through their product strategy, and of course, market strategy, as in how they either go to market and the market size. And lastly, of course, the team, one of the biggest areas that we put the most weight on. But with that also, beyond that, is the matching component of that. As we go down this path, a lot of us were told, like, you don't need this much data points to make an assessment of the quality of a company. You're still going to need, and this was the traditional VC approach, to look them in the whites of their eyes and have that gut instinct to make an assessment of that company. And I said, well, what is gut? And gut is a combination of experiences that you can learn, and you make an assessment, and you can start to break that down. And so I'm not saying we're completely data driven. I think it's a tool that augments our decision making process. But it does show how much that any industry can use it. And we also see that in financial services. I think financial services understood this, especially about 3 years ago, pushing 5, but under 5 more 3. And then there was a rush, a surge, a hype that everything's going to be data driven. I think then we hit a bit of big hurdles in the way as we started to uncover how to make this happen, right? Like there was cultural challenges if we didn't understand how to make the use of this technology, or how can we better fix our back end, our data systems. These data lakes were the dream, and how we can actually make better decisions, but it required a lot of work on the back end. So I think we've seen a bit of a dip post hype, but that said, I do not see this going anywhere. Like the data-driven approach, and we've invested in a lot of good fintech companies that are data-driven as well, adding substantial value over manual processes. We just think, every company. So we use data in our approach in the portfolio investments that we make. We're also looking to better build out their data roadmaps. And for every financial institution, they should be looking at their existing processes and how they can leverage AI, I suppose is the buzzword, to create more efficiencies and create more value for the organization.
Yeah, we talk a lot about it here at FinTech Plus, and I do it offline with others. And of course, we see it everywhere in the news. A lot of fear around AI, a lot of optimism, and still a lot of work to be done. So, interesting to hear your perspective on that. Something that occurred to me is, you mentioned before the strong involvement of the Dunn family office behind the establishment of the Holt Accelerator. Can you tell us about how your business model actually works? Because I think most people are familiar with a very traditional sort of accelerator model. Is that what you do, or are there some unique attributes to how you approach the business side of things and the equity stake, let's say?
Yeah, it's a great question. We were never a fan of calling ourselves. We're trying to think, should we continue to call ourselves an accelerator, even though that's in our name? I feel like sometimes it kind of takes away with what we're trying to do here, where the investment could be better productized. And there's arguably 11 steps to the VC investment process. And we thought through this sort of accelerator lens, we can do a lot of those things and gain greater efficiencies. And what are types of steps, just for clarity? Everything from managing relationships. And so we have a platform for engaging 400 advisors, and we're tracking those engagements to make sure that it's value add for them, but as well as obviously for our portfolio. We look at that from marketing and origination, and this huge data system that we apply to make a better assessment of it. So I won't get into all the details of that. So that's a little bit of how we look at the VC style and how we're called that now. The whole Dunn family, so there are the Dunn, but they have the whole Dunn family office, has been just absolutely instrumental for our development, right? In terms of, they've been long-term, 100 years in this, and they bought into this vision, and were our anchor investors as we kicked off and started this new fund. And if they find interest in companies that they like, potentially they can follow on and invest themselves. They've made investments previously directly or into other funds as well. There can be a strategic partner in many ways, not just in terms of the investment, but potentially to adopt the technology. So we've explored different pilots that have been underway that are moving into implementation now. And a great family office is very well connected, right? They speak the same language, and there is a learning and a culture to working with them. And very fortunate that the family office we work with is very progressive, understands legacy 5 generations later, but appreciates the world to digital, and has been making some great and fun moves in there. And so, we see a world where this ecosystem of all these companies can better connect together, and the family embraces this notion, and having a big supporter like them backing us makes the world a difference.
Yeah, very cool story behind what you guys are doing there. So kudos to you, Jan, for being the architect, I think, in many ways of that. Something I like to ask a lot of people I talk to is where they find their inspiration. And there's a lot of ways we could go with that question. I guess I'll let you choose. Are there some trends right now that you're following, companies that you think are particularly interesting, or other investors that you pay attention to when you look at building your business and developing it further?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, it's always tough because now you're giving a shout out to some of the first ones who started, the tier ones who did it. Happy to do so regardless. I think we looked at the best companies out there, like the Andreessen Horowitz, who I think kind of sort of paved the way for value add investing, right? And how you support your companies with it. These sort of venture studios supporting those companies and how they went about doing that. So that was a bit of a way that we looked at it. And from the word go, we wanted to be value add to our companies, right? So we spent a lot of time trying to think about, how can we best find good companies that appreciate that, scouting them, but how can we then better service and support them? And we built platforms and programs, and a product is where we're going with this, to better support those processes. And I think I previously had a lot of experience in the early stage, in the grassroots, and helping a lot of early stage companies. And it's first and foremost, nothing's more motivating than working with fantastic entrepreneurs who are just so hungry to build what they're doing, and unwavering conviction of the importance that this needs to get there to serve their market. Now, of course, you need some that are humble and can listen and have coachability, but there is that line, and those that walk it are real energizer. It's a treat to work with them. And in a previous life, I was building these, support them, and finding ways to do that better at scale, realizing that a key to this is like a community. It takes a community to raise a startup. And we said, well, let's make our own community. And once you have the backing and the financing comes into play through those concepts, it really starts to take hold and it can take off. So, I think, those are some you're right. There's tons of ways you can go. I think we're drawn from inspiration from a lot of different things that are out there, but those are just some key caveats.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the word ecosystem, and for over 5 years, I've been getting kind of teased and joked about what it means. But I think as we go through, especially the pandemic, and people see the way that these digital businesses are really impacting our lives in a growing way, there's more and more appreciation for what is this whole ecosystem business model, and how can it help us in spaces like this creative destruction of startups and corporates and investors in between. Speaking of some of these trends, I wanted to talk, you mentioned COVID before. I know that's probably impacted your business and some portfolio companies, but do you have some thoughts on how COVID has impacted the digital economy and financial services?
Yeah, so every year we go off and we assess the key areas that we like to look at that we think are going to be impacted, and then we'll place bets there. So 2021 is still underway, but I can tell you what we did see in that process of 2020 and the evolution thereof of that. I think first and foremost, as I mentioned at the top of the program, was a surge of fraud-related activities. As we see during any sort of crisis. And so we looked at a couple areas, and that includes, cybersecurity. We know sometimes fintechs or fintech investors don't touch that as it's separated from it, but we see it as key to serving our community that has been built, and how, this is just an ongoing war, and there's a lot to do. I think we're only in the early stages of that. I think the challenge, of course, is once you're able to get those first beachhead customers in, the market potential is just so massive. But can you build a truly disruptive technology? We've seen some using distributed ledger technologies and being able to build a baseline scenario of all the end nodes of the endpoints of your system to better track whenever there is a discrepancy. And this is an incredibly powerful system because mathematically, the more nodes that you add on, the more powerful your system. Which when I heard that, I went, "This is amazing!" Like, usually, the more end nodes or endpoints you have, the more dangerous your system is, right? So this company is called Narrowis. They're based out of in Europe, in Portugal, as well as London. But a fantastic company. Gives an example. Now shifting over, we still think there's a lot of room to do in the digital assets space. We still think we're in very early days of this. As ourselves are exploring how we can securitize things, how we can securitize our own fund, because it is more efficient, because you can give greater liquidity to your existing investors. And so, we went hard looking for potential ways to tokenize things. I don't like the term tokenize because I think it freaks out some traditional investors, but I do think the world of STOs, I think in some ways we just call them digital assets, it's going to come. It's a matter of time. And so it's a matter about, preaching to those out there, like, get into the space, understand the technology, appreciate its value propositions, and start learning, because it is. And we've seen, and we're seeing tons around, central bank digital currencies right now. There's like 30 plus projects, more or less, that are kind of underway right now. Canada was a leader with Project Jasper as a great example. And it's going to take time, but we are going to see an eventual flip onto those. And lastly, as we saw, what was a tailing segment was in the insurance. And there's tons we can get into, by the way, but the insurance segment we went quite big on, and aggressively actually in our last cohort. 3 of our portfolio companies were in there, because we felt the insurance sector at large was sort of lagging the banking sector, and for better or for worse, but it made for just kind of waiting for the timing to be ready, and the timing meaning the insurance providers and corporates able to adopt the technology and their willingness after a wait and see approach of how it worked in the banking world. And so, we've also seen some great interest and acceleration in the insurtech space.
You did my job for me. I was going to ask you if you were focused at all on crypto space and what you thought about, especially market prices and some of the regulatory developments. You talked a lot about the regulatory side and central bank currencies. What do you think of the last month and the price of Bitcoin and some of its followers?
Hey, it's an interesting concept. I'm not going to stake a claim on where I think the price of Bitcoin is, although I will say when it was at $5,000, I thought it looked quite hot. How much further can it go? Some things that, I think do affect pricing is there are just these super religiously adamant hodlers, right, who are hanging on, that are going to maintain this system. And it is sort of kind of the one that has led the way and has pulled through and persevered through, different potential issues that could have occurred, in terms of how it's structured. And I think it's a great benchmark for that. But for us, though, like, we don't invest, as in our fund, into the crypto space directly. When there's a gold rush, it's a great business to be in when you're selling picks and shovels, right? So right now we're more interested in sort of the infrastructure play of the different kind of portfolio companies, whether that be indexing solutions to be able to, build a diversified portfolio of cryptos to better support yourself, because the argument being maybe everyone should have at least 1% of their assets in cryptos. And if that's the case, well, how do you get in and how do you diversify? How do you streamline that process? Or just, other than that, just the underlying technology itself is incredibly beautiful. To this day, it's still mind-boggling how, you took these different areas of game theory and mathematics, and we're able to make this system work. And when you see how that kind of functions, it's, and so whether you're using that for, distributed ledger technology, as examples that some of our portfolio companies do, I just think there's a lot more room in the space. I think we're still in the early innings, and there is going to be a bit of that hype stuff of going up and down like we see with AI. But over the long term, I think there's a lot more to do in the space.
I wanted to ask you, as we kind of come to the end of things, do you have some tips, whether it's sort of in general for fintech entrepreneurs and those trying to navigate, especially the valley of death in fintech, or probably more precisely and relevant companies that are interested and others who are interested in engaging with the Holt program?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a grind and be able to get there, but unfortunately, the most straight answer that I can really give any of those entrepreneurs that are in there is make sure that you have a path to get customers and get that profitability. At the end of the day, we're, especially in Canada, pretty internationally, there's more exceptions to the rule. And in the US, being able to raise big rounds on napkin kind of style ideas is very, very challenging. So ensuring that you're getting those first customers in, or the validation or market network, like whether you're B2C or B2B, there's ways to show that you have a funnel of customers that are ready to convert, that the economics show that it's going to be very attractive. I do understand in fintech it's substantially harder because the costs, you can't just build an MVP. It's got to be a little bit more polished than that, and there's regulatory rules that go into it when you're handling people's money. This is serious business. But making sure that you can also show, and there's always ways of building these tests to prove that the demand is there to be able to raise your financing. So, and it's rare that we find people that are truly gifted in the sales, and when they're in B2B, the sales aspects of it. It's sometimes one of these skills that are kind of underlooked in many ways and taken for granted as your founders and you're building your products. There is an art and there is also a science to it. So making sure that you have a line to that customers so that you can help get those rounds solved for.
Great insights. Jan, as we look ahead, it's still it's surprising it's mid-January already, but what can we expect from you guys in the program in the coming year? What are the developments ahead for you guys?
Yeah, so 2021, we're going to see, we're very excited for the next fourth cohort, in which we have a really solid team around us and the new industry trends that we're going to be seeing. And we'll be announcing a lot of this stuff pretty soon. And then we're going to go to market and find the kind of the top companies that kind of fit into those boxes and go through another rigorous program that, gets better and better every year as new advisors come on board and new LPs join us. But one thing we're saying to ourselves as our companies grow up and they go from a 3x return on the money invested so far, and we're seeing some great breakout stories of companies that started at a pre-seed and went to Series A. We do a great job scouting and supporting. Well, we're looking now at how we can get better funding mechanisms, so more funding to go into the breakout style companies, de-risking further investments for certain style of LPs. So we're spending a lot of time on looking at a potential second fund to follow into this. No announcements there, exploring the options, but always looking for really good LPs at this stage as we go into 2021. The world opens, which we see optimistically. Yes, we're still getting remnants of 2020, but hey, I think second half of 2021, we're going to see a nice new world start to open up with us, with a lot of opportunities for us to start build. Hoping for a relatively faster recovery with a lot of the government stimulus that's going through this, and activities like fintech that are one of the best ways not only to protect our health as we are able to stay at home and still continue the economy to move forward, but a great source of new jobs of the future and a great investment vehicle to put to invest into right now.
Very cool, Jan. I'm running out of questions here, but I was curious, is there any last messages you want to send to our audience before we say goodbye for this time? I'm sure we'll be catching up in the coming months. It's a busy year, probably around your demo day, but any last words you'd like to share while you've got us today?
Hey, we're always looking for smart people who want to join the community. So whether you're a startup and you're listening yourself, or your potential advisors, so you're an LP or an investor, you're a corporate in the space, we believe there are no barriers when it comes to innovation. So I'm talking from a geography or a technology background or whatever it may be. We have this platform, and we're always looking to engage and make it valuable for you as you spend your time with us, right? We obsess over how we can give the most value to our advisors and to our startups. So I guess I'd throw it out there and be like, hey, if anyone's of interest, please reach out, get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Well, that's the power of the ecosystem, as we both know, Jan. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights. I had a lot of fun today, and I'm a little homesick of Canada. I hope there's lots of snow outside. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you in a few months. So good luck.
There is tons. We're getting snowed on right now.
Beautiful. Well, looking forward to catching up when the warm weather is there and you have more news from the program. But until then, thank you again for joining us this week.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Cheers. All the best.